Hello, this is the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranson. In observance and reflection on Black History Month, today I'm going to be talking with a couple of trailblazers in Michigan transportation. One, a former colleague of mine, Myron Frierson, who worked more than 40 years in state government, most of that time at MDOT, in a number of capacities, retiring in 2019 as Director of Finance. And then I'll be speaking with Rita Screws, a native Detroiter who has spent her entire life there and spent nearly 40 years working for MDOT, managed a transportation service center in Detroit and held a number of other positions. And both of them have some interesting stories to share about the challenges that they faced along the way and what their opportunities were and the satisfaction that they got out of working in transportation. You'll notice that Rita's audio sounds like she's on the road, and that's because she's a passenger in a vehicle, and that's where we caught up with her. But first, we're going to start with Myron. Myron, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Jeff.
So let's start with how did you get into MDOT to begin with? What was your first entry?
I was an auditor with the state of Michigan. I was with the Auditor General's office for several years, and an opportunity presented itself at MDOT. And it was a situation where my career at the Auditor General was going to be on hold for a while. So I thought that it was a good time to try another department. And I did. And so I transferred over to MDOT and started in the contract services division. And what I was doing is reviewing contractor documents and accounting stuff. And but I started learning about contracts, and then I had a couple mentors I had met there at MDOT, and they opened up some opportunities for me to learn some more in the accounting area. And so I moved over to financial operations division within a year, or about a year and a half of coming to MDOT. And there what I did was I started looking at operations and working with people to try to improve various operations. And then that led to some entry into some management jobs. And I eventually became a division head. And I was probably about my early 30s, which was unheard of for a person to become a division head in their early 30s. But I was. And we were able to deal with the accounting issues for MDOT. We were able to deal with the budget and other aspects, federal highway, a number of different things. So I was in that job for about 11 years.
So was that the contract services division at the time?
It was financial operations that I became the division head of.
Okay, so explain to us what that means in very basic terms.
So I was basically I was responsible for the accounting operations of the department, the payment operations of the department, the project reimbursement, where we work with local units of government and the federal government regarding reimbursement for highway construction projects.
So a lot of that was pass-through money, and MDOT's responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, was to make sure that it was being spent the way it's supposed to. Exactly.
Travel. So I was involved with, working with people on travel policies and things like that. So all the administrative core accounting, that's what I was over.
So in those days, how integrated was state government overall?
The department was trying to increase its diversity during that time. Even in the 70s, the state government was trying to increase diversity. And so when I started with state government in 76, they were doing some recruiting. I went to Michigan State, so there was recruiting there. So there was opportunity being open. There wasn't a lot of folks. That of course, but still there was definitely some effort to do some things. Even at MDOT, there was an effort to put women and minorities in management training slots. Some of my coworkers, they received those opportunities, and some moved on. That was just the catalyst they needed to advance their careers. So I think that was very helpful for MDOT to do that. it was a situation where many a day I would sit at a table and I would be the only minority at that table.
And you got used to that, or did you always
Well,
resent it, or was it
I,
challenging, or?
I think that's some of the duality of being a black person or a black man in America, is that in some situations, you in your especially in your professional life, you may be the only person of color at that table.
Every business is different. Every governmental unit is different. Every nonprofit is different. Do you feel like, talking to your friends and neighbors, that your opportunities to be heard and to advance and grow, were, I mean, how would you rate those against others, I guess?
I had a desire to learn stuff and go beyond what was expected, and I think that helped, and work with people and show value. That try to make sure that people knew that I can provide them some value, and that approach has helped me through my career, rather than me waiting for somebody to do something for me. Now, as a result of that, opportunities presented themselves. So things that people said, okay, hey, I want you to work with me on XYZ project, or I want you to take this assignment, because I started to build a track record of success.
Well, this is where I should probably say, as someone who came to the department with only the basic knowledge of a journalist, that you were a tremendous help and mentor to me in understanding both the complicated things involved in transportation funding, which there are several, but also contracting and all the things that go into that. And I think you probably were a mentor to many people, and you drew on your experience to help them. So talk about how important that is for others that follow you.
Well, it's important, because we have an obligation to help people be the best that they can be, and it's not that difficult. I mean, it doesn't take that extra time to sit down and explain why something happened, or try to understand the person's rationale for making a particular decision. And I think the thing is also to help people understand that they're in a safe space, that they can share their thoughts and feelings professionally, regarding a task, and that you're there to help. And at the end, we want to be of value to the department, and we want to do things that can help the department achieve its goal. So if we can maximize the potential of our various employees, that's a good thing.
Well, you say it's not that hard, but when you're getting calls morning, noon, and night from a comms guy asking questions because reporters are calling,
yeah.
Sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds.
Well, no, there's days when you get calls about something, a multi-million-dollar problem, and other times you get a call that same day and the water fountain in the hallway is not working properly.
Yeah.
But again, it's important to that person with the water fountain.
So you ended up and retired as the finance director, basically the head of the Bureau of Finance, which is a pretty important role. But that was after moving around the department and doing things
right.
As broad as working in real estate.
Right. So what happened in 1994? I was asked to go down to the metro region and serve as a division administrator and be a liaison with the department and local governments in the metropolitan area. And I was became a non-classified state employee. So I was a non-classified state employee during that stint. And one of my assignments was to look at the I-94 project, and also another I-96 project, and look at ways of the pros and cons of privatization.
So when you say you were a non-classified employee, were you answering to the governor's office at that time?
Yes.
Okay, who was the governor?
It was Engler.
Okay.
And so I went down there, and so I did that. I was a liaison with the city of Detroit and other communities. We talked about project development issues, in a hodgepodge of different things. But the benefit of that, because I was always a central office guy, and so actually working in the field and meeting with the engineers, the techs, and planners and stuff, I got a much better appreciation of what MDOT did on the ground out there in the field. It helped me in my later jobs understand some of those operations. Now, I'm not an expert in it, but at least I had its exposure. As I would say that it's easy to write policies and procedures in central office, but you're not the one out there actually have to deliver those policies and procedures. So it helped me get a better appreciation.
Yeah, it gave you a feel for the decisions they have to make in real time and what they're dealing with on the ground. So yeah,
right. And
sounds like that was very helpful.
Yeah, it was. And so I did that for about almost a year and a half, and I got an opportunity to become the administrator of real estate division. And again, this is an accountant.
Talk about what that entails. A lot of people don't even know that MDOT has a real estate division. So in those days, there was probably a lot more property purchase going on too.
When we were buying for a Haggerty connector, we were still buying for M59 and also for M6. So those were the major projects going on in the mid 90s when I was out there. And so one of the things I learned there is the guy that's coming in from the outside, now your division head, is to show that you can be of value to the organization because they got a new leader. And so there were things I knew about working in finance and contracts that could help. I had contacts and things that could help. And I was able to help my folks navigate some administrative hurdles, because of those contacts. And again, obviously that developed our relationship. But there was involved with AASHTO's real estate subcommittee, real estate and utility. Was involved with setting some policies related to billboards. Was also involved with some changes to the condemnation statute. It was a great time, a great learning curve. And some high-level negotiations on properties, but I learned a lot about what the department did and the importance of working with the regions and the central office and the property owners and trying to negotiate with things. And then and one of the things we tried to do is make sure that we're sensitive to the needs of people we deal with. And
talk about that and working in eminent domain.
Because one of the things I would say to people is that their property is probably on the second or third highest treasured possession next to God and your family. And so we need to understand you just can't go in and just say, here's some money and I want your property. You have to be sensitive to know that these people were living their lives and they never asked for this. And here we come, we want to build a road, some type of improvement. So we have to be very, very sensitive. And we had some tools that allow us to factor in, accommodations and things. But we also had to always have that attitude. We're here to acquire your property, but we want to make that process something that is painless as possible.
So did you wrestle with that sometimes? Can you talk about a circumstance where you really felt for a person? Because like you said, I mean, maybe it wasn't about the money. It was, this is my home and I don't want to leave and I don't want to give it up. And yet you thought that this project was for the greater good. So
yeah, we've had some situations where we went into I don't want to get into specific locations, but we did have situations where people had farmland, for example. And they talked about their families being there generations after generations. And again, we're trying to make accommodations. Sometimes we will try to help them go to the extent we could, help them relocate somewhere. Maybe not having the same situation, but at least it mitigated some of the loss of their property. There are you had the individual who had their home or their farms, small farm. Then you had the small businessmen, and then you had the big corporate guys. And the corporate guys was a little bit more taxing, but again, they had pros and cons and issues that they had to be addressed.
What would you say, I guess, going forward as you look to the future about careers in transportation? Obviously, you were in an organization that, mostly builds roads and bridges, and you weren't an engineer, you weren't involved in the building,
Right.
but you found tremendous satisfaction in all that you did,
Yeah.
and felt that the work was important. So what would you say to younger people, especially younger people of color, about the satisfaction that can come out of that work?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a number of things that I found that's very rewarding. The mission at the department is to provide transportation for the economic benefit, for the quality of life benefits. There's nothing that we do in modern society does not get impacted by transportation. So even though I was an accountant and on a peripheral, a lot of different things, but I could take some satisfaction that we just built this bridge. We just avoid, this natural problem with flooding or something. We were able to fix that. We were able to improve the flow of traffic to make someone's life better. Or we were able to help to attract a company to Michigan. So there's a lot of interesting things that the people on the outside don't realize about government in general and transportation in particular, that it can be rewarding. I was just thinking about this call, and I was thinking that they don't do TV shows about transportation planners or engineers, but it can be exciting. That may be a little nerdish, but it can be exciting working at MDOT. And when you see a field, and then all the negotiations, all the meetings, and then several years later, there's some type of improvement there.
So you did a lot of work, for instance, the last several years on the Gordie Howe International Bridge.
Yes.
You could obviously and should be invited when it finally opens. Would that be something you'd be interested in attending?
I definitely. Because that's an example of something that was talked about for over, I would at least say 30 years. Because I remember in the 90s when I was down in Metro, we were working with the bridge company on the reconfiguring what eventually became the Gateway project, and that was in the 90s. And then the additional bridge, the new bridge, the Gordie Howe Bridge, again was being discussed. A new crossing had been needed for a number of years.
Thank you, Myron, for sharing your story and for your years of service to the state and the department, and for being willing to talk about this. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I miss MDOT, and I think MDOT's doing real good these days, and under your Director Adjaba, and I wish everybody great success.
Once again, we're back with the Talking Michigan Transportation podcast. As promised, we'll be talking with Rita Screws, who is a longtime MDOT employee. Not quite 4 decades like Myron, but she's close, and she certainly has done a lot of different things with the department. Most proud to be born and raised in Detroit, and continues to be a real booster and cheerleader for the city. Among other things, she headed up the Transportation Service Center that MDOT operates in Detroit, and she's done a number of things. So Rita, thanks for taking time to talk with me.
Are you welcome? Thank you for having me.
So talk about life. You wrote a little bit about this for an internal newsletter recently, but what were the challenges and rewards of being a Black female engineer in a time when there weren't very many in the business?
Well, I think initially, number one, I didn't think of myself as that. Obviously, going to engineering school, there weren't many African Americans nor women in the field. But I came from a family of 5 brothers who are all older than me, so I didn't really see that being something that was an obstacle at first, and so I guess that probably helped me. But kind of like I had written, I found it to be interesting as I started to get outstate, how the perception that the city of Detroit had, and coming from Detroit, I didn't think of myself as being that being an issue for me, but I tended to learn that as I moved further, got further out into and exposed to other parts of the state, the opinion that it had. And of course, I'm just one that wants to dispel myths that are out there about people, from Detroit, or people of color, or women in engineering. There were some people that said, well, they didn't see me as a typical engineer, what their single story might be about an engineer, being very rigid and not very personable, or dealing with people, but pretty much, dealing with numbers and technical types of situations more so than dealing with people. So it was interesting to work in the field and to help to dispel those myths, but I guess I didn't really carry them with me, and so they didn't hold me back from doing that.
Well, so it's interesting to me from what you wrote. It sounds like your kind of love and faith in Detroit kind of dovetailed with what you developed as this interest in transportation and engineering, and you found a way to pursue a career, but that also let you kind of, like you say, dispel those myths and try to help write the true story of Detroit and what goes on there.
Yeah, I just try to, I'm proud of my background, and I know many, obviously being from Detroit, it's home. I think that most people are proud of their home and proud of where they live. And so you want them to be able to, you care for your family. I'll call it my family, just like I call, Detroit TSC my family. MDOT is my family too. And so you want to bring out the best of your family. I see myself, as I talked about, you always give your best. I was always taught to give our best. So, I wanted to help them to see, the best and become the best, and to reap some of the rewards that, as a big city of Detroit, needed to reap. They needed to have the voice, and they needed, people need to know what they're missing. I guess if you still choose to miss it, you will miss it. But, there's always a lot of great things about Detroit. I guess I've been told that I always try to look at what's the best in people. Everybody has something that they bring to the table. And I think when I read the single story article that we shared within MDOT, it really is true that a lot of times people don't have an exposure. They don't have an opportunity to have exposure to something different, to learn a different story.
Yeah, talk a little bit about Detroit. I mean, growing up there and working there in a role for the state that put you in close contact and the need to collaborate with the city folks.
In the past, there've been just as with any city, I think there's been controversy. There's been, Detroit's kind of a migrant city in terms of, my parents migrated up here from the South, the southern, southern areas of the United States,
the Great Migration.
Yeah, to work. My dad was a auto mechanic, and he worked for Volkswagen. He didn't work for the big three, but a lot of those who reside in the city, are products of that. Very hardworking people and very proud of what they earned and what they worked on. So as initially, when I came to the department, though, there was a relationship between the city itself and there's a huge bureaucracy. It's always been a difficult animal. It's huge with so many different departments and cohesiveness that was missing. And then there was some distrust that I noticed when I was first working in the Metro Region office as a utilities engineer, and I worked with the city of Detroit, that there was just a huge disconnect and attitude as if they just was letting Detroit just exist. Okay, as long as we'll just keep it going. A lot of times, one of the things I recognized is there was a project they were trying to kick off a project on 4th Street in Southwest Detroit at the time. And I found out that the project had been on the books for like 8 years. And it was because something about getting a participation agreement or something that they couldn't get this project kicked off. And so, it's things like that, that if nobody wants to work with the city to try to help them, to show them, what they needed to do or why this project wasn't happening, that kind of delays, they needed, was really unheard of. I think the project finally got off the books. So I was also involved in some meetings coordination meetings that just seemed to spin and stick on the same agenda every month or every 3 months when we would meet. And so when the concept of transportation service centers came up, I was really interested and thought, in my head that, wow, that would be a great opportunity to really build a relationship with the city and bring about some betterment. I did interview for the development engineer, and that I saw that was a avenue to connect with the city in development and the projects. When that opportunity came, I was really interested in it, although many of my colleagues thought that I had really lost my mind. They told me, lovingly, Rita, have you lost it? Did you read that PD? But I did. I really, truly felt that I could make a difference. And in many ways, I had a credibility. And my credibility being a resident and knowing Detroit as I do, it brought a credibility for me with citizens of Detroit, because, they would be off on one tangent and they're frustrated. And when I really say, yep, I really understand what you're saying because I live here or I've been there, and it just, sometimes that would change their whole attitude because they had never met someone. They always saw the state as this bureaucracy coming to them, telling them what they were going to do, rather than someone that was willing to listen to them. So
Yeah, that's
really
that's a great point.
Yeah. So for some reason, even from the first, when I was first hired as an engineer, uh, one of the gentlemen that I dealt with was Jack Cruz, but I remember him coming to the office when he was. They were going to pilot what maybe now has morphed into the EDP program, but at the time that I came, there was no such thing. And so he was looking at having engineers from, let's say, the metro area, outstate, come in and work in the Lansing Central office for a few months. And he brought me in and he said to me, you get along with everyone, don't you? And I didn't really know what he meant. And so, but evidently there's something, and that's why I call it a superpower, where for some reason, regardless of the people, regardless of their background, I tend to have an impression on them, and I'm able to have a conversation, and I try to listen mostly, listen and see if there's some phase, somewhere that I can help. That's why I say after 30 some odd years, that still seems to be it. So I don't know what it is. So that's why I call it my superpower.
Well, it makes it hard to, as a teacher and mentor, it makes it hard to pass that on or explain, how to develop those skills to a young person. But yet you've done that. You've been a teacher and a mentor. So what do you do? Is it mostly just what you said, just talking about the willingness to listen? Is that the biggest advice you offer?
Well, it goes through, over the years, and as we're getting into, learning about empathy and listening to people, you really have to care. You can't, and I care, and I cared about the city. I cared about it, but I really cared about the city. And so if you really care, you listen, you have to be true. And if you truly want to help someone, then you can either your sincerity, they see the sincerity in you. I just believe that they do. And then you build trust. because, you build trust in them, you keep their confidences, and you're working with them to really make something better when maybe their previous experience had not aligned with that. Then you just happen to build the trust, and then you also build an allegiance, that they're always there because they're so grateful for you to make that difference in their life, and it's just a benefit to you because there's always going to be someone that you need. We can't do anything alone. If we've learned anything through this pandemic, that is it, that we can overcome obstacles if we're working together and we're seeking to help each other, as opposed to, putting someone down or trying to, step on somebody's head to get to the next level. And I guess that's just the way I've always been. So.
Well, that's very well said. And I very much appreciate you taking your time to share that and share your story. One last thing, tell me this, since this is, Black History Month and we're transitioning into Women's History Month, talk about somebody who's been particularly inspirational or iconic for you, that's inspired you in your years in your career.
Oh boy. Well, and you know why this is so difficult for me, Jeff, is there are so many little guys that have influenced me, that has changed my life, that I say have changed my life. A lot of them, like one of the reasons that I said I stayed with MDOT, that I didn't really voice in the article, is that I came into contact with so many just awesome people. There was a technician in the Detroit office when I was a co-op that, when I was trying to enroll for a class and I couldn't get an advance on my salary when I started, brought me the money to register for my class and didn't know me from Adam. I've had people who believed in me more than I believed in myself even then. Like I said, with youth, I had a lot of zeal, but sometimes as things beat on you, you tend to lose that fire. But there were people, encouragers even within MDOT, who encouraged me, to go forward. My parents, my dad, he passed away when I was 16 years old, but he too, even though he wasn't an engineer with a degree, he was a miraculous engineer. He was a miraculous person that knew everything about a car. He would come up with inventions. And so he was an engineer. I think that must be where it comes from, and I know that when he passed away, that so many people's lives he touched, that it seemed like people were coming from just all over. I think that really he was the example for me, about how to be good to people and to help people.
Well, that's really nice. I'm glad you shared that. Well, thank you, Rita. Thank you for taking time to do this, and safe travels.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Great talking with you.
Thank you again for listening to this week's edition of Talking Michigan Transportation, and I'd like to thank Randy Debler, who does our sound engineering. To check out show notes and more, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts.